What if I told you that a single moment, just a few seconds on the road, could quietly turn into a legal mistake that costs you thousands of dollars, even if you never intended to break the law? And here's the unsettling part. Millions of drivers make this mistake every single year, without even realizing it. So let me ask you something. Have you ever passed a stopped police car or an emergency vehicle on the side of the road and didn't change lanes or slow down? Be honest, because your answer might reveal whether you've already broken one of the most expensive traffic laws in the United States. Take a second and think about it. And if you've ever been in that situation, drop a comment below and share what you did, because what you're about to learn might completely change the way you drive forever. Now imagine this scene. It's late evening. The sky is fading into a deep blue. You're driving home after a long day, your mind half focused on traffic, half drifting into your own thoughts. The road ahead seems clear, until you notice flashing lights in the distance. A police officer has pulled someone over. Without thinking too much about it, you stay in your lane. Maybe you ease off the gas slightly, but you continue driving past the scene. Nothing happens. No sirens. No one stops you. No immediate consequence. You keep driving, but what you don't realize is that in that exact moment, you may have just violated one of the most strictly enforced and financially devastating traffic laws in America. This law is known as the Move Over Law, and depending on the state, the situation, and the outcome, it can cost you not just a few $100s, but in some cases, up to $10,000, or even more when additional penalties are involved. Now, at first glance, that sounds extreme. $10,000 for not changing lanes? But when you understand why this law exists and how it's enforced, everything starts to make sense. Let's slow down and unpack this carefully. The Move Over Law exists in all 50 states across the United States. It was created to protect people who are working or stopped on the side of the road. Police officers, firefighters, paramedics, tow truck operators, and even highway maintenance crews. These individuals operate in one of the most dangerous environments imaginable, just inches away from high-speed traffic. And the statistics are sobering. Every year, dozens of roadside workers and law enforcement officers are struck and killed by passing vehicles. Hundreds more are injured. Many of these incidents happen because drivers fail to slow down or fail to move over. So lawmakers responded. They created a simple rule. If you approach a stationary emergency vehicle with flashing lights, you must move over to the next lane, away from it, if it's safe to do so. If you cannot move over, you must significantly reduce your speed. That's it. Simple in theory. But here's where things become complicated and expensive, because the definition of safe, the required speed reduction, and the exact penalties vary from state to state, and that's where drivers often get caught off guard. For example, in some states, failing to move over can result in fines ranging from $100 to $500 for a first offense. But if your failure to move over results in injury, or worse, the penalties escalate dramatically. Fines can jump into the thousands, license points can be added, your insurance premiums can skyrocket, and in the most severe cases, criminal charges can be filed. There have been documented cases where drivers faced penalties approaching or exceeding $10,000 when multiple violations or consequences were involved. Now pause for a moment. Think about how many times you've driven past a stopped vehicle with flashing lights. Did you always change lanes? Did you always slow down enough? Or did you assume, like many drivers do, that simply being careful was enough? This is where human psychology plays a role. Most drivers don't intentionally break this law. They underestimate the risk. They assume that if nothing happens, no harm is done. But the law doesn't work that way, because the risk isn't just about what did happen, it's about what could have happened. And that's why enforcement has become stricter over the years. Police departments across the U.S. have increased efforts to catch drivers who fail to comply with move-over laws. Some use unmarked vehicles. Others conduct targeted enforcement campaigns. In certain states, officers even position themselves intentionally to observe how drivers react when approaching emergency scenes. And here's something many people don't realize. You can be cited even if there was no accident, even if no one was hurt, even if you didn't feel like you were driving dangerously. All it takes is failing to follow the exact requirements of the law. Let's take a real-world scenario. A driver is traveling on a 3-lane highway. Ahead, a police car is stopped on the right shoulder with its lights flashing. Traffic is moderate. The driver stays in the middle lane, which is technically compliant, but just before passing, traffic shifts slightly, and the driver drifts closer to the right side. An officer observes this and determines that the driver did not provide enough space. A citation is issued. Now the driver faces a fine, possible court fees, and insurance consequences. And suddenly, a moment that seemed insignificant becomes financially painful. Now imagine a more serious situation. A driver fails to move over and continues at highway speed past a tow truck operator. The operator is forced to jump out of the way. No collision occurs, but the situation is considered dangerous. In many states, this could lead to enhanced penalties, and if there had been contact, the consequences would escalate dramatically. This is why understanding this law is so critical, because it's not just about avoiding a ticket, it's about understanding your responsibility as a driver. Now let me ask you something again. When you see flashing lights ahead, what's the first thing you do? Do you immediately check your mirrors and prepare to change lanes? Or do you hesitate, unsure of what's required? That hesitation, that uncertainty, that's exactly where mistakes happen. And mistakes on the road, especially near emergency scenes, can be incredibly costly. But there's another layer to this law that many drivers don't fully understand. Over time, the move over law has expanded. Originally, it focused mainly on police and emergency vehicles. But today, in many states, it also applies to tow trucks, utility vehicles, construction crews, garbage trucks, and even disabled vehicles with hazard lights on. Yes, in some places, even a regular car with hazard lights can trigger move-over requirements. Now think about that. How often do you pass a disabled vehicle on the side of the road? Do you move over every time? If not, you might already be at risk of violating the law without realizing it. This expansion has made the law more protective, but also more complex. And complexity leads to confusion, which leads to mistakes, which leads to fines. Now let's talk about why the penalties can become so high. Because the $10,000 figure doesn't usually come from a simple first-time ticket. It comes from compounded consequences. Let's break that down. First, there's the base fine. Then there may be court fees. If the violation involved reckless driving behavior, additional charges can be added. If someone was injured, civil liability may come into play. That means lawsuits, medical expenses, compensation claims, and suddenly, the financial impact multiplies. Insurance companies also play a major role. A violation of a move-over law can be seen as a serious driving offense. That can lead to increased premiums, sometimes for years. Over time, that alone can cost thousands of dollars. So when people talk about a $10,000 mistake, they're not exaggerating. They're describing the real cumulative impact of a single decision on the road. Now here's something important to understand. The law doesn't expect perfection. It expects reasonable action. If it's genuinely unsafe to change lanes, you are required to slow down significantly. But significantly is not always clearly defined. And that ambiguity can work against drivers, because what you consider slow enough may not match what an officer considers compliant. And that's where judgment comes into play, both yours and theirs. So the safest approach is simple. When you see flashing lights, immediately prepare to move over. If you can't, reduce your speed more than you think is necessary. Create as much space as possible, because space is what protects lives. And ultimately, that's what this law is about. Not punishment, not revenue, but protection. Protection for people who are standing just feet away from fast-moving traffic, doing their jobs. Now let me bring you back to that earlier question. Have you ever passed an emergency vehicle without moving over? If you have, you're not alone. Millions of drivers have done the same thing. But now, you know something most people don't fully understand. You know the risk. You know the consequences. And more importantly, you know how to avoid it. So the next time you're driving and you see those flashing lights ahead, pause for a second. Think about what you've learned. Ask yourself, am I creating enough space? Am I slowing down enough? Am I doing everything I can to keep everyone safe? Because that one decision, that one moment of awareness, could be the difference between a routine drive and a mistake that costs you thousands. And before you go, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been pulled over or warned for not moving over? Or did you already know about this law? Share your experience in the comments, because your story might help someone else avoid a costly mistake. And remember, sometimes the most expensive laws are the ones we don't even realize we're breaking until it's too late.